New York City has officially banned Airbnbs. We are going to discuss what's going on, why it's important if you are a host, if you are a renter, if you operate short-term rentals, or you are planning on getting into the short-term rental space, and how it could affect you in the future, and what you could do to get around it, and maybe what's possibly to come down the pipeline in the future. Let's talk about it. Essentially, what's happening now is if you want to host guests for 30 days or less on any of these platforms, including Airbnb, Vrbo, Booking.com, you now need to register your property. And that means whether it's an apartment or a home, whether you live there or you own the home, you have to register if you want to have guests for 30 days or less. Now, this is super important for New York City. Not just because it's New York City, but because what New York City means to tourism. So New York City isn't the first place to ban Airbnbs. We could look at Dallas, where they pretty much outright banned Airbnbs altogether. Philly, even outside of the US, Barcelona, you now can't rent out your room rentals if it's 31 days or less. The reason why it's important now that New York City is instructing this ban is because it sets precedent, right? So yes, Dallas is a major city, but New York City is such a big city when it comes to tourism, the finance capital of the world. It is going to create a domino effect with other cities that are going to follow suit if they feel that Airbnb has too much market share in their city as well. Now, if you wanted to abide by these rules and you still wanted to operate your short-term rental unit, you now have to get approved by the OSE, which is the Office of Special Enforcement, a task force created by the mayor. The only problem is, since they started this application process or opened the portal back in March, when they checked in June, out of the 700 plus applications, less than 50 were approved. Meaning that they either don't want to approve it or they don't have the budget and the manpower to take in all the applications. Because as of right now, there are roughly 40,000 to 48,000 Airbnb units in New York City, but only 7,000 of those properties regularly take bookings that are 30 days or less. Which is super important, because what that says is two things. One, not that many listings compared to the grand total are really taking in bookings that are 30 days or less. Two, also, the ones that aren't regularly booked for 30 days or less clearly don't need or not, they rather still host it on Airbnb than take a long-term rental. And the reason that's important is because the reason New York City feels that they are enforcing, or at least what they're telling us, the reason why they're enforcing these new laws and regulations is because they feel that Airbnb is causing rent in New York City to go up. Now, is Airbnb contributing to rent prices increasing? Yes, that is happening. Are they the sole culprit and the reason why New York City rents have skyrocketed 50% and people are paying $5,000 for a studio apartment? No, of course not. But it is the easy person or easy platform to blame when, you know, rents are just going through the roof and people are complaining that they can't find a decent, affordable apartment. So you do have someone you can point the figure at. Let's say this ban did happen and those 7,000 units were all banned and they couldn't operate short-term rentals. It's still not enough units for the demand that's needed to decrease rents. It's just not. Also, something else that we're not really thinking about, and of course they're not gonna say it, is it's not just mom and pop landlords that are listing their properties and their apartments and their homes on Airbnb. There are also major corporations, big hotels that also list on Airbnb and put their hotel rooms on these platforms. So you may look at the number and say, you know, there's 40,000, 48,000 Airbnb listings, but a portion of those listings belongs to major corporations, the hotels, which is interesting because the hotels are probably the one lobbying against Airbnb because they feel like they've lost market share and they feel like they're losing money every month, every year to Airbnb and the guests that they're taking from them. So, you know, it really goes both ways when you look at it. The main issue though will be all these hosts, or, you know, also, you know, what people aren't thinking about too is all these units don't necessarily belong to the regular market. And what I mean by that is, in the last couple of years, people have rented out their homes or their rooms for the sole purpose of Airbnb, meaning they wouldn't have rented it to the regular market anyway. It just so happens that they saw opportunity to make some additional income with Airbnb and they decided to rent out the space they wouldn't have rented otherwise. So these apartments and these homes technically don't really belong to the regular market, or they wouldn't have been on the regular market anyway for some other person to rent long term for a year or more. So, and these rules are supposed to go into effect in September, right after Labor Day, and if you are found guilty of violating these regulations, then you can be fined anywhere from $100 to $5,000. Now, it's interesting because before they couldn't really enforce these rules, although, you know, they were trying to, which is why they created the task force. But now they created some, you know, or they came up with some creative ways on how to enforce these rules involving Airbnb. So now you'll have to add your registration number to the platform, and if you don't, they not only fine you as the host, but they fine Airbnb. And if Airbnb is going to get fined, obviously they're more likely inclined to kick you off the platform so they don't suffer any additional expenses. And they also plan to, you know, affect the transactions as far as payment processing, so that if you do slip through the cracks and you don't have the registration number, you won't be able to receive your funds from hosting said guests. So why are they doing this? They feel that Airbnb has taken too much market share in their city. And this is not just specific to New York, this is Dallas, Philly, any other area that is looking to ban Airbnb. I mean, even other YouTubers such as Shelby Church have talked about this, where they are limited to a certain amount of rental or like guests per year. I believe it's 36 in the area that, you know, she operates in. And I could predict that this is going to be more common in major cities or just other travel destinations, period. They are going to say either ban it out completely, or you're going to have a special license, or you're only allowed a certain amount of, you know, short-term rental occupants per year, which is going to make it pretty difficult for those who bought with the intent to only use these short-term rental platforms. Because if you did your numbers based on the income you get for Airbnb, and you know those numbers decline heavily, then it's gonna put you in a tough position to pay that mortgage or whatever lease agreement you have with the owner when you don't have that same income coming in. So, you know, do I think it's going to cause a major crash? No, especially in cities where the demand is so high and the population is so high. No, someone's gonna come in and scoop the property up. A lot of people bought properties in the last 3 to 4 years for the main purpose of having an Airbnb rental and making additional income through Airbnb and other short-term, you know, platforms. Now, hopefully they did their numbers right, because if you did purchase the property with the purpose of only doing Airbnbs, and now you're gonna take a major slash to any bookings you receive, you're gonna be underwater. So all of these hosts are gonna be affected, and that's pretty much the goal that New York City has, right? Now, do I believe that it's going to be able to, especially, let's take New York City for example. Do I think that it will decrease rents in a way that makes a huge impact? No. I don't even think we'll barely notice. What I do think will happen though is, do I think tourism will be affected? Not really. I don't think people are going to say, hey, I'm not going to come to New York simply because I can't book an Airbnb. I think you do lose a certain clientele, right? Because you have to think about it. Has Airbnb fees gone up, and the cleaning fees, the service fees, where it's no longer as affordable as it once was before? Yes. Now, but you know, there are cases that can be made for when Airbnb is super useful, right? So if you have a party of maybe, let's say, 3 to 4 people or more, then some people may feel that it's more lucrative to get an entire apartment or entire home with a kitchen, multiple bathrooms, upstairs, downstairs, than it is to get a hotel room, especially if all the guests want to stay together at one time, versus having multiple hotel rooms, you know, up and down the hallway. So those people will look for other options. And the other part of it is those people who may not be able to rent out their, you know, their apartment or the house as an Airbnb unit anymore, they simply may not just put it on the regular market. And especially places like New York, where it is mostly tenant-friendly laws, there's a reason why they don't want to do long-term rentals. And as someone who has dealt with a tenant who hasn't paid in years, I can say that, you know, I'm not gonna go back that way. I'm not gonna put my apartment on the regular market for someone to lease for a year or more, simply because the risk outweighs the reward. You'd rather have a short-term rental space where it's 30 days or less. Now, will I do 30 days or more to be in compliant? Of course. But as far as a long-term lease, that's something I won't do. And I can see other landlords taking that same type of tone, because it's not worth it. So what could you do if you plan on, you know, maybe you're still interested in becoming an Airbnb host, you feel like, you know, it's an avenue to get some additional income, you want to be a homeowner, property is expensive, you want to offset that cost, There are some other ways. Obviously, the first way is to apply and get your license. Now, I've applied since June, and I can tell you firsthand, I have not received a response, a notification, not even an email saying that they received my documents, and I don't know if I ever will. But that'll be number one. Whatever city you are in, see if they have guidelines allowing you to operate as a short-term rental to rent out to guests for 30 days or less, and go through those proper channels. That way you're just above board and you don't have to worry about any fines later on. Now, if that is not an option, there are still other things you can do, which is something that I'm going to do myself personally. If you've been looking at my Instagram, then you see I have tons of videos of me starting and pretty much just documenting the process, and that is midterm rentals. So right in between short-term rentals, which tends to be, you know, 30 days or less, and long-term rentals, which is a year or more, that middle ground where it's 30 days, maybe, you know, 1 month to 6 months, or even up to 9 months, that's the space I tend to operate in. So renting out to travel professionals, right? Such as nurses, physicians, professors, even contractors, insurance adjusters. The list goes on. There's a ton of people that come to a city, government officials, tech professionals. They come to a city for work or for whatever reason, or maybe they're just trying out a city and they want to stay somewhere for longer than 30 days, but not as long as a year. That will be my target audience that I plan on renting out to. And there's a ton of sites that you could look at, similar to Airbnb, but they specialize in renting out to longer term guests for midterm rentals, such as Furnish Finder, right? Where you can rent to traveling nurses, pastors. There's so many people that travel, you'd be surprised the reason that they're traveling for. And you can rent to these guests where you have the luxury of not being tied down to a long-term rental, but while also being able to abide by the new laws in your city. So that's my plan, and that's the Airbnb update. A lot of people have different reservations when it comes to Airbnb. Some people feel that, you know, Airbnb is taking too much market share and it is causing rent to go up. Some people love Airbnb for the amenities and the luxury that it has to offer, you know, when you have the free range of the entire home. But how do you feel? Do you feel like these bans are useful, they will make a difference, or do you feel that these bans are stopping you from doing what you want to do with your home, or what you plan to do whenever you get a home? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next video.